Friends, today we will be discussing about writing a research report. This lecture will be in two parts. So we start the first part of this lecture of writing a research report. Uh, Now the question arises, what is a research report? Obviously, when you do some research, you need to bring it to the notice of the people who have sponsored or who have asked you to conduct the research. Now, during the process of research, there were some objectives of the research which you wanted to attain or you have attained after following a particular set of methods which you called as methodology, and ultimately you have reached to result. Now, this entire process have to summed up in the form of a report so that any person who is external to the entire setup can read the report and understand from the very beginning to the end of this report. So generally the research report is presented in the form of text, and so the research report is a written presentation of the facts that the researcher faced during the phase of the investigation or during the process of the entire research. The research report gives a better interpretation of the findings and the facts that has been observed by the researcher in the course of this study. In every research, after all the steps like the identification of the research problem, review of relevant literature, setting up of the objectives of the research, fixing the hypothesis, collecting and analyzing the data, drawing inferences is complete, the researcher shall compile all this in the form of a report and place it for the purpose of getting it authenticated by the agency which has provided him or her with the responsibility of doing that particular research. It is a clear structured document in which the writer identifies and he or she examines the issues, events and the findings of the investigation. So after all this course, entire research is complete, and the last step of a research is to produce the research report. So the findings are there. Now interpretation of the findings should also be there in a report, and the report also should provide a direction that what is to be done next, what is the outcome of the research obviously, and what can be done next. That means some recommendation or some directions are also to be provided for future researchers. So this a report should not be a report in solidarity, but the report should express the way in which further research can be carried out in this field. So all these things compiled together from the very beginning to the end along with the recommendations comprises of the research report. There are several other things also that a research report needs to display. We will see this in due course of time. Now let us look at the characteristics of a research report. Now, first thing is the clarity in the research report. The report should be very clear. It should be concise. It should be accurate. It should be well organized, and the chapterization should be very clear. Now, this entire report should not be a continuous body of text, but depending on the different items of the research, like identification of the research problem or introduction to the problem, literature review, that means similar type of works done by other researchers, setting up of the objectives and then the hypothesis, the different methodology that are used for conducting the research, then the results and findings, then a recommendation of the research, and then the works which has been consulted, data sets, then calculations, details. All these things should compile a research report, but there should not be a single body of text, but obviously a single body of text, but not a continuous body of text. But these things should be divided into different chapters which make the good reading of the research work. The second characteristic of a research report is simplicity. Simplicity in terms of language, simplicity in terms of use of technical terms or methodology. The methodology used should be appropriate, but in a way it should be understandable by the people who read it out or the audience for whom the report is targeted. Language should be simple, and things should be very precise, and expressions, statements made should be unambiguous. So this actually is another important characteristic of a research. Next is the presentation of the report. The report should be well formatted. It should be free of grammatical and other types of error. The proofreading should be done in a very nice manner so that all small errors, incomplete sentences are taken care of, and all necessary corrections are done. Diagrams should be used, but not tables and diagrams for the same data set simultaneously. That means you draw the table, you make a table, and then once again you represent the table through graphs. These should be avoided. Graph should be used only when it is necessary, or you feel that there should be a graph which explains the data or presents the data in a better way. Unnecessary use of color should be avoided. Color should be used only when there is a necessity of doing that, and entire report should be presented in proper font size which is easily readable. Line spacing should be sufficient so that the natural reading of the natural reading is of the reader is not hindered, and it should be have sufficient margin in all the sides, so that on binding the text does not enter inside the margin. So these are ways in which things are presented properly. Chapterization should be done properly. The chapter should be identified in a new page, and there should be a proper index where we can go to the chapter along with the page numbers. Generally, most of the reports start with a summary, and that is called as an executive summary. In executive summary is a few pages, very small report which summarizes the entire process of the report. That is starting from the statement of the problem to the recommendations. Everything should be there in an executive summary, but in a very concise manner, so that if this actually is a type of abstract which explains or tells what is there inside the report. Now, whenever one wants to go to the details, they may refer to the report, or else the executive summary should give a bird's eye view of the report. Lastly, the visual appeal of the report. The report should have a visual appeal. It should be, does not mean that it should be decorated with lot of color and unnecessary use of different types of font sizes, etc. But it should be done in a manner that which is expected from a scientific report, and but it should be presented in a nice manner along with required tables, figures, charts, etc. The big data sets which the researcher might have produced or say used, if provided, should be provided in the appendix of the report and not in the main text. Small data sets which does not run to more than one page may be accommodated in the main report. So these are some of the characteristics that is expected from a good research report. Next, let us look at the purpose of writing a research report. The basic purpose of writing a research report is to provide information regarding the findings of the research work that has been carried by the investigator to the entire research community and beyond the research community. It is to place the methodology of research and to provide an authenticity of the findings in a public domain. Now, every research is carried out with a methodology. Some of this methodology may be so that it has been followed by several other researchers, and certain methodology might be a new one which the current researcher has undertaken, or it may be combination of some old techniques or previously known techniques of analysis, but combined together in a new way. This requires the approval of the public in general and the research community in particular, and that is one of the purpose why these things are placed in a research domain, so that the people involved in research approves these when it is placed in the form of report. This actually proves the worth and legitimacy of the research job. If any research work is copied from other previously done researchers, then such work will not be, the such researcher will not have the courage to put these things in the research domain and for public viewing, because of the fear of being get caught, and such things are called, such practices are called plagiarism. So to avoid plagiarism, or to understand that the things are not plagiarized, the approval of the research community is required, which is attained by putting this research report in a public domain. These research reports are written for the purpose of getting a judgment of quality, so that when one read the report, they can understand the quality with which the report has been written, and the findings of the researcher within the academia and outside the academia. That is the purpose for which research reports need to be written. On doing this, the researcher achieves a benchmark of the research activities that are being performed by him or her in that particular research work. This helps the researcher to get appreciation of the standards, consolidated arguments, and to identify the knowledge gaps or the research gaps that are existing in the available research work in the relevant field. So keeping all these things in mind, it is important for writing the research report, and this actually lays down the purpose of a research work. Now let us look at significance of the research report. But what is the significance of this research report? The task of the researcher remains incomplete till the report has been presented and or placed in a written form. That means the research work, entire work is done in parts, and if it is a big research work, it might have taken several days to complete it. So they are scattered in different ways, and the researcher needs to compile it and place it in a written form, which is the many things are done during a research which might not be so much of significance. So the significant things which are placed in a research report about the research in a systematic manner. So that is the why the research report needs to be written. This is a process of communication where the researcher tries to conduct convey the findings of the research results to a general audience. It provides a direction in which the research was conducted, and in the same and in related areas, because when the entire review of literature is done, it tells about all the different types of studies that has been undertaken in a similar type of area or in the same area. This leads to the identification of the need of the research, and hence the research is being taken up by the current researcher. All these things are understood from reading parts of the research report. It authenticates the quality of the work that has been carried out. This is an evidence of what was the research problem actually, what was the research which was not done in that area, which the researcher has attempted, and that it has been accomplished with success. So all these things comes together in a research report. Now let us look at some of the guidelines for writing a research report. First is revising the expectations of a research. Before starting the report writing, the researcher should revisit the purpose of the research and expectation from the researcher. That means what is the research community expecting from the current research work that has been taken by the researcher. If the researcher is intended to submit academic reports, minimum steps and format are well designed. So an academic report has a particular type of format which are to be attained. Hence, researcher should identify the answer to some questions, as what is the objective of the research? Is there any format of report? Is there any word limit? who will read the report, what is the process of report evaluation, etc. Answers of such questions help to make a good report. Outline of the report. On the basis of the type and objective of the research and the methodology that is used by the researcher to reach the objectives, the researcher needs to prepare a outline, that is the roadmap of the research report. When the outline of the research report is decided, it helps uh, helps the researcher to understand how many chapters shall be there, what are the different sections in each of the chapters and the corresponding subsections that shall be there, whether the report shall be descriptive type of report or it should be an analytical type of report. In simple words, the outline helps to arrange the idea before starting the write-up. It is the planning phase of the research and the content of the report for making the report more effective. So more this is specific, the better will be for the researcher to plan the different activities in which the report, which will be there in the report one after the other. This is basically the blueprint of the outline of the report, is basically the blueprint of the entire report. Next, arranging of data. On the basis of the objectives of the study, the population and the sample for the research, the researcher collects the data from different sources, which is subsequently used in the report for the analysis, and accordingly based on the analysis the conclusion are drawn. Different types of data might have been collected for a particular purpose. Such different types of data from different sources need to be processed and tabulated. Some may be collected from the primary sources where the researcher goes down, surveys himself, collect the raw data and then compile it and then further use it for analysis. Some of the part of the study might be based on secondary data where the researcher use the data which has been already collected by someone else and already has been processed and tabulated. So such different types of data from different sources are tabulated and processed accordingly. Only relevant data are sequentially arranged, generally in tabular form, so that right information can be placed in appropriate part of the report while the report writing is being done. Next, writing the report. Once the researcher has completed point number 1, 2 and 3 discussed previously, he or she should start writing the report. Report shall start with a cover page spelling out the title of the project, name of the authors, that is the researchers of the report, and their affiliation. Other accessories like declaration from the researcher about the authenticity of the research report, acknowledgement that the researcher made about those people who had helped in the completion of the project, a preface which is basically an introduction to the report or discuss very briefly about what is done in that particular project, the content page of the report, etc. The content page shall also contain the list of tables and figures of the report. Following the content page, the chapter should be placed one after another. In some reports, it is found that before the starting of the first chapter, there is an executive summary of the report, which actually summarizes starting from introduction to the end where the findings or the recommendations are made. And at the end of this, there should be bibliography or references, that is those research work or those texts that are being considered while the report is being prepared. Some of the reports also come with a glossary, which is actually the a collection of all the technical terms used in the report. All the data sets are appended to the report and some computations or calculations might also be appended in the report if necessary. Now, preparation of the first draft. Once the report is complete with a single report is completed, it cannot be a single effort of completion of the entire report. Once the report is written, the researcher should update and upgrade the report with a series of revisions. For this purpose, the first draft is to be prepared and revisit the whole draft, and the revisit of the whole draft should be done very carefully. Some necessary descriptions may be added or removed, interpretations need to be done, and analysis should be done as and when required. Next, we have the last review and rewriting. Once the report's first draft is ready and necessary editing is been done, after revisiting the report several times, there even then there remains a scope of some improvement. It is true that in each reading, one can find that something is to be rewritten or rearranged. This makes the report further refined and it becomes interesting and excellent. Thus, researcher must read and reread the draft again and again. In rewriting reports, some language experts may also be considered so that there is no grammatical error in the report. So with this, we come to an end of the first part of the research report. We'll take up the second part of the research report from structure of a research report in the next video. Thanks for watching this video.